guys, hope y'all are having a fab day. Welcome to my final unhaul of 2023, and I got quite a few books to talk about today. I think we have 39 books here that I am getting rid of for whatever reason that we're going to talk about in this video. I can't remember when my last unhaul was, which is why we have so many. I think it was potentially like late spring, early summer. So yeah, we have quite a substantial stack, and as we're getting into Christmas, I'm about to do like my big Christmas deep clean before all of the decorations go up, and I need these books out of my house. So when I'm going to be going through these in any particular order, the majority of these I have read and I didn't like them, which is why I'm unhauling them, although there are a couple of outliers here. So we'll just talk a little bit about why I no longer want these books on my shelves as we go through the stack. And there are two stacks. There's one here and there's a big one here as well, so we might be here a while. But kicking off with the top of this stack, we have Lore Olympus Volume 2 by Rachel Smith. I love Lore Olympus. This is the Illumicrate edition, and I missed the Illumicrate edition of the first one, and I was like, you know what, we'll go for the Illumicrate editions from Volume 2. And I do like the Illumicrate editions of these, just not enough to pay for them every time a new book is released. They have foiling on the cover, and they also have an ombre sprayed edge. But what is the newest volume that I've just got? Is it Volume 5? I haven't read it yet. I only have Volume 2 in the Illumicrate edition. I don't want to have more than one volume of Volume 2. So this one will be unhauled. And they are nice. I just don't think they're nice enough to warrant buying them over just like the regular editions. I think what did it is that for Volume 3, I wanted the alternate cover art, which was a Waterstones edition, not the Illumicrate edition, so it ruined my intention there straight off. We have two full series that I'm going to be unhauling, and of course there's one book from the series right at the bottom of this stack, but that is the Blood Grace series by Viola Roth. This is heavy. Indie paperbacks are no joke, guys, but this was my Patreon book club series. It was supposed to end, I think, right about now, but I actually DNF'd this halfway through. So of these 6 books, which is not all of them, I read 3 of them, and I just could not with this series anymore. I read book 1, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It's like a vampire story, but like very political, where the vampires are the antithesis of everything we believe them to be in folklore. So they don't kill people, they're not dead, they actually work with nature in the process of feeding, so they're actually very peaceful creatures. The problem is that nothing happens in this series, and there's literally no stakes in the relationship. So a lot of people hate the vampiric creatures, the Hesperines, and that provides the basis of the plot. And then there's also like wars between the kingdoms, the human realm, the mages and the vampires. The first book is like a lot of setup, and that's fine. It's the 2 main characters getting to know each other and setting up all of these politics and the plot. But then you have like one moment of high action at the beginning of book 2, and there is nothing. Like through the entirety of like book 3, there's 2 whole books, which is like 1,000 pages of literally nothing. And because there's not even any stakes in the relationship, it was just dull. Like, it's a very well thought out world, and you can tell that Viola Roth is like really into the world building of this series, because instead of anything happening within the plot, you'll just have like 2 pages about why we use sleighs to transport things in the Hesperian kingdom. But it was just far too slow for me, and it's such a shame because I love the covers of this series. But yeah, sadly this one just wasn't for me. A Christmas reverse harem story that I really enjoyed was Tangled in Tinsil by Trelina Pucci. I want to say Pucci because I don't want to say what I think it actually is supposed to. Just why, girl? Why? I mean, fit in, but why? So this one is about a girl who is an interior designer, and she's doing up this cabin for this like group of like really rich friends, and there's a snowstorm that snows her into the cabin with this group of guys for the weekend, and antics ensue. It's pretty much smart. I actually really enjoyed it, considering I'm not much of a reverse harem girly. I think for me, as long as it's just smart, that's fine. It's when it like throws in the feelings, and then like we start to make serious decisions based on a wild weekend we had in a cabin. I just can't get behind it, but I enjoyed it. I'll never reread it. Another full series I'm going to be unhauling, which I don't do this very often because I am sentimental and attached to inanimate possessions. I'm unhauling volumes 1 through 12 of Children of the Whales by Abby Umeda. You guys know that I refused to give up on this series for the longest time, and eventually eventually I realized I read volume 12 and I was at the halfway point and I just wasn't enjoying it anymore, and I just could not read 10 plus more volumes of this. So sadly this one will be saying goodbye. I think I just don't like episodic stories. It's the reason why I don't like long running paranormal series. I just feel like I want the plot and the pacing to be a little bit tighter, because like with this you'll have a couple of volumes that are really good and then you'll have a volume where absolutely nothing happens, and I'd rather we just trimmed the fat and got to the point and had like every installment just more tightly plotted, so that we weren't getting these installments where pretty much nothing was happening. This one is about a floating island in the sea of sand called the Mud Whale, and the inhabitants of it, they have no knowledge of the world around them up until they're scouting for supplies one day on an island that they pass, and they meet a girl who essentially throws open the entire world for them and potentially reveals some truths about why they live on this isolated island that just bobs along on the sea of sand. Really stunning art in this as well, which is what drew me to it in the first place. I kind of just ran out of patience with that one. Next up I have In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. This was sent to me by Black Crow PR, which are a PR company that work with publishers, most notably Tor, I feel. They actually offered me an arc, which I accepted, of In the Lives of Puppets, but it went missing in the post. And so when the book was close to release, they sent me a standard edition of it instead to make up for like the lost arc. But at that point I had already pre-ordered this from Waterstone, so I had the one with the real nice edge, and then I also got it in the adult fairy loot. So I already have two special editions of this book. I don't need the standard edition as well. I have been tempted to hold on to this one as my reading copy and then unhaul it, but I just don't really have enough space on my shelves when I don't know exactly when I'm going to be reading this. I'll just read one of my special editions. One that I wanted to love it. I wanted to love it so much. Actually, there's a couple here that fit into that category, and that's upsetting. But the first one was The Song of the March by S.M. Gaither. This one is a fantasy romance series that I could tell you absolutely nothing about at this point, and that is the reason why I'm unhauling it. I just kept seeing this around in Waterstones. It's one of the indie series that has been picked up by Penguin, so I thought I'll give it a go. It is exciting. It's annoying when I'm in the middle of a series and then they get picked up and I can't have the indie paperbacks that match the indie paperbacks that I already have. That's annoying. But seeing series that I'm not in the middle of picked up by publishers and then seeing like fantasy romance in regular bookshops, that's exciting. And I was excited by this and I picked it up and I cannot tell you anything about it. Like, the writing was just so unengaging, and then there were points in the story where there were things happening and I was like, I should be eating this shit up. Like, I should be loving this. And I cannot pay attention to this book for like longer than one page. So yeah, the whole thing was a blur, and then I kind of wanted to continue for no reason because I didn't enjoy it, but we're just calling it quits, and that one's going. The other one that I really wanted to love, this is another one that I have stared at in Waterstones for years, and it was my book club book for Italy because it has a Venetian inspiration. So it was the book club book for my Italy trip and I just didn't love it, and that was Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. So this one is about a girl who is a con artist, and she infiltrates this like noble family pretending to be the daughter of one of their estranged family members, because she knows they're not going to check up on her because they hate the family member that's her mother. So naturally, like, they're suspicious of her when she first turns up, but what she doesn't realize is that this family are actually poor. Like, they can't support themselves, never mind support her as well. So she starts to like try and prove herself to them by entering into like the politics of this world to try and improve the family's standing so that they will like accept her and her sister, who's posing as her maid, so she can extort them essentially. And it started off strong. I liked the atmosphere, but then I felt like it just was going nowhere after a while. There was so much going on and I don't feel like it was coming together. I feel like the elements were strong, the execution was a little bit off, and I found it boring. So sadly this one was a miss, and once again one that I've been staring at for years. Finally bought it and read it, and it was a big disappointment. One of my book of the month thrillers that I've never read is Things We Do in the Dark by Jennifer Hillier. I enjoyed this. I can't remember if I gave it 3 or 4 stars, but this is about a woman who is married to a comedian, but she has something to hide. Like, she's essentially in hiding, and the suspicious death of this comedian brings her into the limelight, and it's limelight that she doesn't want because she doesn't want anyone to know about her past or her true identity. And as this is being publicized, as she's being framed for her husband's murder, people from her past recognize her, and her past starts leaking into her future, and she's doing everything that she can to keep it buried. I enjoyed this one. I don't remember much about it at this point, and for me, thrillers are all vibes. Like, I want to have a good time when I'm reading them, but they're not necessarily going to change my life, and that's fine. That's not why I'm reading them, but that was definitely the case with this one. So now that I've read it, I'm done. I don't typically reread thrillers because once I know the plot twist, once I've had the thrill, you'll never have the same experience rereading, but I enjoyed it as at the time I was reading it. One that I did not enjoy, I think I've already unhauled actually. Yes. So I read a book by Rosie Danan, which was the sequel. It's like one of those series where it's like a series of standalones, and I read book number 2 for the Literature Book Club, so that one's already been unhauled. But I still had the first one on my shelf, which was The Roommate, and after like that book, which I can't, is it The Intimacy Experiment? That is my worst book of the year, so I don't want to read this one. And I know, like, I think some people enjoyed The Roommate a little bit more, but I just can't. Knowing how much I dislike The Intimacy Experiment, I can't go into this impartially. Any review that I gave of this would be biased, so it's not even worth me seeing if I would enjoy it, because I'm already going to go in with the expectation of hating it, which is gonna affect my opinions when I'm reading it. Back in last year, the year before, whenever A Court of Silver Flames was released, which I think was 2021, I got the Illumicrate box because I wanted the set of dust jackets, the custom dust jackets that came in it, but the book that came in it wasn't a special edition. I don't think they needed to include the book, because now I have just like a standard edition in a bag that I'm now unhauling. I have at least 2 copies of every other ACOTAR book, because I have the like normal set displayed on my shelves, and then I have the new covers with dust jackets from the Illumicrate box on also displayed. I don't need this one though, because this doesn't have the original covers that match the first 3, like the OG covers for the first 3. So I've been keeping hold of it because I have 2 copies of the rest of the books, but I don't even have space on the shelf for it. And A Court of whatever it's called, it's coming out in January, so that one also needs to go. It's just taking up space. An arc I received from Bloomsbury, speaking of Bloomsbury, was Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher. This one is kind of like, it's a YA historical, but it's actually like a YA contemporary romance with a historical backdrop to give it a bit of spice, you know? So this one is set in the same world that like King Arthur and Merlin and Guinevere live in or lived in, and these are like a few generations removed from those characters, so they're not really sure that Merlin ever really existed, but they are, or at least one of them, Art, I think, is the descendant of Arthur, but like very distantly. I don't even think he's direct line, and he is engaged to marry Gwen. However, Art actually really likes boys, and Gwen finds him kissing a boy, and then Art finds Gwen like mooning over this female knight, so they agree to fake date and to go along with the betrothal, with the agreement that they can like pursue their own romantic interests. It's like a queer rom-com set on like the backdrop of Camelot. It was a good time, it was okay. I actually DNF'd this one halfway through though, because it's just not for me. And I do like Casey McQuiston, and I felt like this would be a Casey McQuiston vibe kind of book, which it is, but I'm not a YA contemporary romance girly anymore. I just can't. It's just not interesting to me. I do think this is really good. I did really enjoy what I read of this in like an impartial way, and like I think this would be good for its target audience. I just don't think its target audience is me. I then have everything that I have that's by Amy Kaufman that isn't also by J. Kristoff. So that is the first 2 books in the Starbound series, and then the 2 books in the Unearthed series. So I read this, I think, right at the end of 2021, and I actually enjoyed it. But then I read this recently, and I did not have a good time with this one. Amy Kaufman arguably does what she does pretty well, like along with J. Kristoff and also with Megan Spooner, and potentially on her own as well. I haven't read a book that is just singularly authored by Amy Kaufman. She writes, and I know she writes a little bit of fantasy now, but she's written more sci-fi. She writes really fun, campy, fast-paced sci-fi with some characters that you can root for on like a quirky space backdrop, and I previously have enjoyed that. However, when you've read Illuminate and you've read the Aurora Cycle and you've read These Broken Stars and then you've read Unearthed, these are all the same stories on a different backdrop. All of these characters are exactly the same. Like the Aurora Cycle characters are the same 6 characters as the Illuminate characters, just in a different setting. And that's fine because, like I said, arguably she does this well. I'm just bored of reading it at this point because I've read so much of it. So I was tempted to keep these and read the rest of the Starburn series because I definitely enjoyed that more than this. I feel like this was just truly not fun. Like, it's mainly set in a temple that is like an alien temple, and these people are trying to crack the code to get the loot, which is like alien technology that will save the planet Earth from dying because it'll provide power for like millions of people. But there's something about watching other people or reading about other people solving puzzles in a temple that is so boring. It's like if you read about Tomb Raider. Like, that's what it is. It's like if you read about Tomb Raider or Indiana Jones where they're just in a temple solving puzzles and you can't solve the puzzles aren't explained to you in a way that you can solve them before the main characters. You can't get involved at all. Literally just reading about people solving puzzles. So yeah, those 4 are gone, and I don't think I'll read anything else from Amy Kaufman unless co-authored by G. Christoph. But like I said, Illuminate and Aurora Cycle are even the same, so maybe I'm just over that whole thing at this point. But Illuminate is like one of my favorite series. Next I have Queen of Empire by H.R. Moore. I have read a different book by H.R. Moore and I enjoyed it. It was okay, but I didn't continue with that series, and I also don't have a burning desire to read anything else by this author. So I haven't read this one, but I will be unhauling it. One that I started recently and then DNF'd 50 pages in because I just knew it wasn't going to be a good time was Fable by Adrian Young. This is one that I actually should have unhauled a long time ago when I did my self-destructing books, maybe for this year. But Adrian Young was supposed to be at Rare. She didn't end up being there, but I thought I would keep hold of it in case I ended up, just to give it a chance, as she was then on my rare list. It gives me an excuse to prioritize her. There's some fantasy authors in my rare list for 2024, like YA fantasy authors, where it's just giving me an excuse to prioritize these books. And then I saved it from my unhaul pile for that reason and then forgot about it. And so it actually came up as like a randomly generated pick during the Bookoplathon recently, and I started it, but I could just tell 50 pages in that like it just wasn't going to be for me. Like with the Lex Croucher book, it maybe has its target demographic, but that's not me anymore. One that I read recently and I was very disappointed by is For You and Only You by, once again was going to say Joe Goldberg, but it is not. It is Caroline Kepnes. This is book 4 in the You series, and like Amy Kaufman, Caroline Kepnes is just doing the same thing over and over and over again at this point. I just want some plot progression in this series instead of throwing Joe into a new scenario every single time and just having the same kind of events play out with one subtle difference. The main reason why I'm unhauling this is because I am a simp for these books, okay? I cannot stop reading these books, but I don't need them in hardback, so I always get them in hardback so I can read them before the paperback's released, and then later on I'll get the paperback to put on my shelves. Although thinking about it, I might actually just keep You and Hidden Bodies at this point because I didn't love book 3 either. Do I need the entire series on my shelf? Arguably not. It feels weird though to just only have 2 books out of a series. Like the people who unhaul Akatar and Akawar and keep Akamath blows my mind. Another one that I read very recently and didn't love was The Girl in Red by Christina Henry. This was my second chance for Christina Henry, and this one was okay. I enjoyed this one more than I enjoyed the first 2 books I read, which were the first 2 books in the Alice series. But this is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. I don't think that what Christina Henry does is necessarily considered a retelling, but this one has, like, if you don't read pandemic books because of the pandemic, don't read this, because it does feature a virus which is called the cough, and a lot of what Christina Henry predicted when she wrote this about how the world would handle a pandemic, scarily true, guys, like scarily accurate. So the main plot of this is that this pandemic is happening, this girl and her brother have to evacuate their home to find safety, and they hit a lot of obstacles along the way. Like the wolves in the woods are the men that they meet along the way, like the groups that spring up to sow chaos or to protect themselves and their people at the cost of everybody else. Those kind of people are the obstacles that they encounter along the way. This felt like a filler episode of The Walking Dead, like, you know, the side characters where it fills in their backstory and you actually really don't care. It's literally a filler episode. That is pretty much what this was. And then it's just like Christina Henry gave up. There's literally a point in this book where it just stops and then skips to the end. Why? I don't understand. So I actually enjoyed some of of this. I enjoyed the pandemic. I enjoyed when I got into it. I enjoyed the reading process of it. But the end was just like completely pointless. And Christina Henry's writing is a little bit more juvenile than I typically like. So a book that actually was in this pile that I think I'm going to put back on my shelf is Lost Boy, because I have it. I picked it up at a charity shop for $1.99. Same with this one. I had a decent time with that. I'm just going to read this at some point in the future and then unhaul it a little bit later on. I also unhauled Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. I gave this 5 stars when I read it and then never continued on with the series. At this point, while I do still think that this was really good, it was the atmosphere for this that I loved. And I also love that it's a middle grade story but also an adult story. Like it doesn't have an age limit on it, and I love books that are timeless in that way, where you can take different things from them depending on when you read them. I just think at this point I'm not going to reread this, and I'm also not going to continue on with the series, so it's just taking up space really. And then 2 very pretty fairy loot editions I'm unhauling. The first is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio. This one is a YA fantasy. It's a retelling of a Korean legend. It kind of falls into the category of books that I really like the Winter Night trilogy, Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I'm sure there's another one, The Pomegranate Gate, kind of feels a little bit similar. But those historical fantasies that are a little bit folkloric, a little bit magical, especially in terms of like Gods of Jade and Shadow, this is like a YA version of that because it's like all contained in one book, and I liked it when I read it. I liked that it was that story format that I really like, which is essentially like a fairy tale-esque retelling. So I like the hints of modernity. I like the history mixed with the fantasy and like the folklore tale. This also had some Spirited Away vibes, which I really liked, but I just liked it really. It felt like a YA version of stories that I loved. So if this was adult and it went a little bit further in some elements, I feel like I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. Obviously, once again, that's a me problem, not a book problem. So yeah, I really liked this. It's gorgeous, but I just don't really need, because I have so many books, I don't need to be keeping 3-star reads that were fun in the moment but are not like super impactful. Like that space that can be taken up by a TBR book even, which is why my TBR actually is so big. It's because I unhaul quite a lot when I've read it, and then I replace it with books I haven't read because I like having a lot of choice, and then I just keep my 4 and 5-star reads, you know, or some of them at least. And then in a similar vein, a book that I liked, didn't love, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by, was gonna say Emily Wilde, but it's Heather Fawcett. So this one is a historical fantasy about a young woman who is a scholar, and she is putting together the world's first encyclopedia of fairies. Fairies are a known thing. Like, she's been to college, she works at a college in specializing in fairies, and she goes to this island where she is trying to categorize this island's fae for the first time, but she is having a terrible time with the locals. Like, they don't want to talk to her, and because of that she's struggling with her research up until her academic rival, who is called Wendell Bumblebee, I think. Yes indeed he is. He turns up and he gets on with the locals straight away, and this really irritates Emily. So it has like, once again, a fairy tale plot going through it. I really like the atmosphere in this, and I also really like the character of Wendell. The characters were really cute. This is just, while it has a plot that is more high stakes than I would say is your typical cozy fantasy vibe, the atmosphere of this and the pacing of this was very cozy fantasy-esque. So while I enjoyed this one, I did just enjoy it, and I don't want to continue with the series. I don't think the series has anything like the sequel has anything to offer me, and so I don't need to keep book 1, which is sad because in a recent fairy loot I got some page overlays for it, which are gorgeous, but I'm just not keeping the book. So whoever is lucky enough to get this book will also get the set of page overlays that go with them as well. And that is my last unhaul of 2023. So leave me an emoji in the comments, actually, because I always struggle to ask you guys to answer like a question at the end of this video, because what is it, like, tell me if you loved any of these books that I'm getting rid of. Like, that's just cruel. So leave me a mushroom. Is that a thing? Yes, it is. Leave me a mushroom emoji down in the comments. Just let me know that you guys are here to represent Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish Kindle website, the Etsy for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.